Hey everybody, it's Angel from Halo Inspirations. We give you inspirations to help you spread beauty and joy through your quilting journey. It's Wednesday, it's Wednesday. Happy hump day to each and every single one of you. Yes, and thank you all for stopping by. I hope you're finding your hump day to be a fantabulous one. So what are we doing today? Well, I've had a lot of you ask me about mitered corners. And some of the terms a number of you actually use is perfect. Mitered corners. Well, I'm going to be frank with you. There's no such thing as perfect, at least in my opinion. Now, we can do prettier mitered corners. That is the truth. Now, one of the things that I did was I actually pulled out the quilt that I used for binding. So this video is just only on the mitered corners. So if you're looking for binding, I'll put a link up here for you. It's a long one, but I pulled that same quilt out. Now, I'll throw some pictures up here so you can actually see the mitered corners on this particular quilt, and they look good. But what I thought was really interesting is it was a good demonstration on how, in fact, you know, when you wash a quilt and you use 100% cotton, for instance, in your batting, and it gets a little crinkly. And it'll tend to do that sometimes with your 80/20s also. Just maybe not as prevalent. Well, guess what? My binding went a little crinkly too. And I thought it made it look really pretty, but it actually looks really good with your mitered corners. And I thought, oh, this is a great time to show you guys the pretty mitered corners with some crinkle. So those pictures I threw up while I've been talking. If not, I'll do it here. But today is just on that corner, like I said. We're just talking about mitered corners. Now, I am going to do two different methods. I'm going to do one method this week and one method next week, and that way they're shorter videos and you can digest it. But the first way is that I'm actually going to machine bind it to the front. This dark gray is considered my front. And then I'm going to hand stitch on the back, okay? Now I'm only doing the corners. Just again, this is only about the mitered corners. So you won't have to sit through a bunch of me stitching because that's not what's important. So what things do I use though? I wanted to give you an idea. I do use a ruler, which you will see because you all know me, I'm not good at guesstimating. I use a marking tool. And I try to match thread to my binding. Now for demo purposes, which makes it super ugly, I'm using black thread on white fabric. Not a good idea, just so you know. Now you don't have to match it to the binding. I know some people like to match it to the backing, but I find myself to be one of those that stitch with the thread that matches the binding. And I do that because I'm more successful at hiding stitches than I would be if I matched it to the backing. Now you can do whatever you want, but I'm giving you my opinion, okay? And I just find it easier to hide the stitches, to make them almost invisible. So I am going to show you how to prep that corner when you machine bind it first to the front, and then we'll do a little hand stitching and talk about that mitered corner. Next week we will be talking about machine front and back. Now I have done it a couple ways, and I don't know which way I talked about it during the video when I was filming this, but I used to do it where you machine bound to the back and then pulled it to the front and then did the machine binding on the front, because that way you can see it and it makes that almost pretty for you because you're able to see those stitches. But I have started doing where I machine bind to the front still and flip the fabric over towards the back and machine stitch that down on the front using a stitch in the ditch. But we'll talk about that next week, and you will see some differences inside the mitered corner. And it will, that way you have an arsenal of information to make your own call on how you would like to do your mitered corners. So let's go ahead and get this started, guys. And let me bring you into the sewing machine. I'll see y'all soon. Okay, so I've already got it loaded here. I'm just doing a short strip, just going around this corner to get those pretty miters. So the first thing you want to do is you want to start sewing. And at some point, when I get closer, and this is just me because y'all know how I am going to mark, well, this is interesting because the camera's in the way. I'm going to mark a 1/4 inch. So let me take it from the other side. Let's see if that'll help. It will. All right, so whenever you go to stop, you want to be a 1/4 inch from the corner, okay? And you could eyeball it, but if you really want to get precise or persnickety like I do, then, and of course with the camera not here, it's a lot easier. I'm just going to make a little mark. Okay, that was a lot of fun. And when you get down to that end, yeah, I just want to make sure it felt like about a 1/4 inch. Yep, I got one more stitch. Okay, then I'm going to back stitch it just so it holds. And I'm going to go ahead and cut threads. Okay, so we have gone all the way to just about the 1/4 inch away from the tip. Okay. Now the next thing you're going to want to do, pull you over to this other camera. So we have sewn all the way along here till right about a 1/4 inch away from the end of the quilt. Okay, you're going to take your binding and you're going to make an angle that goes from the corner all the way, there we go, goes from the corner to the tip. And you're going to want to make that binding that you've pulled back, you're looking for a straight edge, okay, right along from your quilt top to the rest of this extra binding that we folded over, okay? So the next thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to fold this back towards yourself, okay? Now there's a couple of methods here and you may want to experiment with it for yourself. I actually fold mine so it's just right along this edge. I know a lot of people who give themselves a little grace and they'll come down right below it, okay? But I personally like to meet it right equal, okay? And then I'm just going to simply take a clip just so it stays while I reload it underneath my sewing machine. And I get something to hold it there. You could use a pin. You could use whatever you like. But that way I know when I go to load it, I'm going to load it over here and I'm still going to be straight. Okay? So let's pull that over. Now remember, as I said earlier, when you do it with putting it on with the machine and then you're going to hand bind it, we are adding it to the front of the quilt. Because we want the front to be pretty. So I just get it simply loaded up again, get it nice and straight. And I'm going to come down at the end as close to the edge that I can. Grab onto this thread. So first I'm going to go ahead and lower the presser foot, and then I'm going to go ahead and lower my needle. That way I know it's being held. And then I'm going to get rid of this clip because I don't want my machine to get jabbed with it and etc., etc. Now this is another thing that I do. I go ahead and stitch a couple, and then I go back a couple. Give it a nice little back stitch. And then you're just going to keep sewing. Now I've got a little bit of drag. Okay, for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go ahead and stop here, but then of course you would keep going to the next corner and repeat. So let's go ahead and take this to the next step. Okay, so as you can see here, we have sewn all along here, and then we came to the corner. We stopped about 1/4 of an inch away from the end. We did the fold thing, started back up here, did a back stitch. Of course, I did a back stitch at the end here too, because you want to hold those in so those stitches don't come out. So sew along here, do your back stitch, fold it, restart with another back stitch, and then keep going along the end all the way to the next corner. And keep going around until you're ready to stop so you can join. All right, so what is the next step? Well, the next step is that we're going to start to flip this over, okay? Now, there's a couple of things that I want to mention. I am going to use any kind of pokey thing that won't go through, okay? And some people at this point will press. To be honest with you, I usually don't when I hand stitch to the backing, okay? I usually don't. It's my method. You can feel free to do so, but I typically don't. Now, when I am machine binding, which I'll talk about next week, I do press, and that's because I use glue, okay? But in this situation in hand stitching, I do not. So we have stitched along the top, and now we're starting to flip it to the back, okay? And what I really want you to notice, and I'm trying to get a good angle here. Yeah. So this side, the fold is right here, okay? And this is the top of the fold, okay? This is the bottom underneath that fold. So this is where all the bulk is at this point, okay? It's important that you pay attention to this, because what you want to do is the opposite on the back. So I want the majority of the bulk to be on this side. This is going to help get that pretty point. So what I do is I fold in on the side with the bulk, and then I put the other side on top. And you can see that on this side, it makes a gorgeous mitered corner. So what's going on the back side? Well, I'm just gonna hold this down a little bit. All right, let's see. And this is where you have to really work with it if you really want to get it pretty. What you'll do, and at this point you can feel free to use that tool to push your corner out if you like, okay? Now that doesn't look too bad, but what I want to do is I want to actually, because I know this is my top, I'm going to keep that on the top. So I'm going to pull this back out, get this down, fold it over, and you can manipulate it so that you can get that pretty miter on there. And then at this point, I clip it, okay? And I'm not going to sew a whole bunch, but I want to show you one more thing that I do with my corners so that they look nice and pretty. Let me get another clip. To be honest, I really don't like that, so I'm going to pull it down just a little more. Nope, I'm going to pull it up. And this is what I'm talking about. If you really want that pretty look, do not hesitate to manipulate your fabric. I guess it was good. Now I've got it all kind of goofy. All right, there we go. So, pinning it in place. Okay. Got a pretty corner right here. All right. The other side looks awesome. If I pull this off, you can actually see I've got a beautiful mitered corner. Okay. Now I used a binding that has it's a little big for this quilt, but that's okay. Now, when you go to stitch, as a reminder, you want to match your thread to your binding, not to the backing, to the binding. It'll help hide those stitches. I'm using black so you can see it. It is not going to be pretty. But this is only a practice sandwich. It's been sitting around for years and now it's getting a little bit of extra oomph in it. So when I start, I'm going to go way in because I don't want you to sit here and watch me stitch forever. But I made a quilter's knot. Okay. I did make a quilter's knot at the end there. I'm going in on the binding and I try to come out past the seam line. Okay. And you want to make sure that you're not coming out on the front of your quilt. I've done it plenty, and you'll just have to get your seam ripper out if you don't catch it ahead of time. And I just simply pull the knot so it sits on top inside the binding, inside the seam, okay? Fold that down. See if I can get it to stay a little bit. Now, wherever you came out, you want to go back in. Okay. And then you want to come out right at that fold line. Making sure I don't go through. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and pull that through. I'm standing up. Y'all can't see this, but I've never sewn standing up, so this is a little weird. So I've came out. This stitch is called the blind stitch. And like I said, I don't need you to sit here and watch this because we're just talking about corners, but it's about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. And the better on the fold you are, the less you're going to see. And if this matched the binding, you wouldn't see that anyway. Then you're just going to go back in, come back out at the fold, 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch, somewhere in between. All right, now there's a couple ways to do this on the corners. You don't have to do what I'm about to do, and I'll show you where I would stop if I didn't. But I'm going to go back in here. I've got a couple more stitches to go. Okay, just checking it. I don't know why. It's just a practice sandwich. I guess it's out of habit. Okay, when I come out, notice that I have this folded. Get this thread out of the way. And I've got this nice pretty corner right here. So when I come out, I'm going to want to come out right at that corner to grab that fold. Okay, so I'm going to come out right at that corner. All right. So I'm going to come back in and I'm going to come out on the fold right at that corner. All right. So I'm right there on that corner. Now remember, if this, at this point you could, if you wanted, continue just to keep on going. You turn you turn your quilt top or your quilt and you just continue. You do not have to do this next step, but by doing this next step, I really truly feel that it helps make those mitered corners really pretty. But it is just a preference, okay? So I'm going to go back in, and just like we did along the side of the quilt, I'm going to come out at the fold. All right. And again, you do not want to go through the front of your quilt. And we're going to do a blind hem stitch up the side here. And it's usually about 2 or 3 stitches depending on how big the binding is. But it's the same deal. You're going to go back in and come out at the fold. Okay. Now you're going to see this with this dark thread. It is what it is, but if it was a white thread, it would get lost in the sauce. So I'm going to go up, come out about that fold. Pull this down. Sorry, guys. Come out. This is the last one. This will be stitch number 3. Okay. Now at this point, I'm going to go and back in to the hole. And I'm going to want to come out to the other side. So at that point, I want to go in and I want to come out at that point. Okay? So I'm coming out at that point. I went in at the point, coming out at the point. Okay? And you're going to do the same thing going the opposite direction. And I think I usually hold this different, but it's demonstration purposes. It will be fine. Whoop! Got caught on the wonder clip. There's one. Go back in. Come out at the fold. I keep moving up on you guys, I know. I noticed. Okay. And I'm going to do it one more time. Try to get myself positioned at the fold. Okay. At the point. All right. Now, remember I said, and this one's not so pretty. I'd probably rip that because I came out too far, not in the fold. If you pull this really tight and you were lined up on the fold, it'll shut these out, okay, those other stitches. But you're able to see this one, and it's black. It would hide better on white. But if I really wanted to pay attention to that, you want to come in or come out along that fold, okay? But at this point, you can see where I've come out here. I'm going to go back in at that point, and when I come out, I want to come out down at the bottom on the fold. Well, this is a lot of fun doing this backwards. All right. Okay. So I went in at the fold, at the point. Okay. Now I'm coming out at the point. And we're going to simply pull that through. Now what you are seeing is me stitching right to left, and that's because I'm right-handed. But I've known some people who are right-handed and they do just fine stitching the other direction. So it really is all about what you're comfortable with. But when you do this, not only will it help save your corner, let me turn that up just a little. There we go. Not only will it help save your corners in the wash and tugs and tears, but it actually makes those mitered corners really pretty. And then you just keep on going. So you go back in where you came out, about that place, come out on the fold, making sure you're not going through to the front of the quilt, and give it a nice tug, and you'll have a pretty miter. And then you just keep on stitching until your next corner, and you do the exact same thing. Okay, so there's one, and she pretty. And there's the other side. Let me flip it over here. There we go. Beautiful, beautiful. Now I could have pushed this out a little bit more, but I think she looks great. So there you have it, your mitered corners. See you guys in just a bit. Oh my gosh, I almost forgot. Happy St. Patty's Day to each of you. It is March 17th. Hello. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Now, at the beginning of the video, during the video, you didn't see any green. Please don't pinch me. But I went and grabbed a green bracelet that my mom made for me out of several little charms, and the actual bracelet is made from the things that soldiers use to keep their pants the way they need to at the bottom. Being that my husband's a retired soldier and my dad too, this was quite a gift, but it's green. So I got green on, so you can't pinch me now. So happy St. Patty's Day to each of you. At any rate, that's it for Mitered Corners, guys. Just know that the more you do it, it's just like everything else in quilting. You will get better and better. And I will definitely be seeing you next week with machine binding completely. And I'm hoping to show you two different methods, the front and the back machine binding, so you can actually see some differences. And I ain't gonna lie to you, I'm better one way than the other. But I'm gonna try and plan that out so that you can have that in your, like I called it before, your arsenal of information to allow yourself to make a educated decision on what kind of mitered corners and what kind of binding that you want to do. So at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard, nope, we're in daylight time, Eastern Daylight Time. We sprung forward. I will be on Facebook for a live session of quilting and answers. So if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, just want to chit chat about some mitered corners, I'll be there today live on our Facebook page. Link for that is down below. Love to have y'all come out and share your beautiful green blocks or quilts inside Creative Kingdom. Link for that is also down below. And last but not least, I did want to talk to you about, I did make a binding calculator when I did the binding video. So I'm going to put the link for that. It's free. Grab it if you like, but it helps you determine how much yardage you're going to need for your binding of any quilt top that you're making. So that is a free thing for you. Just hit that link below and I'll send it to your email for you just as soon as you ask me for it. So, or relatively soon. Give me 24 hours. Okay. So, at any rate, I will definitely see you guys hopefully at 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And until next time, until next week, may y'all continue to be inspired, productive, and joyful, and never stop making your dreams in quilting come true. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Love y'all. Thanks for stopping by. See you soon. Happy quilting.